So, Chloe, obviously the thing that you're really well known for is Made.com, but we want to take it back and start from the beginning. So, tell us a little bit more about early days, Chloe, pre-startup, and kind of how you ended up first finding out about running a business.
Okay, well, first, thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for showing up. I'm going to try and make this, I guess, you know, as much as a story as I can make it practical around my personal learnings. So everything I'm going to talk about is actually things I've discovered myself going through this process. There's a lot of things I won't know the answer to. You can try and ask me, but I think there's been some really interesting challenges in building the business and having a few change of career. So I grew up in Paris, where I was born, and I decided to go into architecture. I think primarily because I was feeling quite a creative person, but I was also worried that the creative industry wasn't particularly good at delivering a clear understanding for what the job might look like when you come out of creative academics. And therefore, I thought architecture has an official state diploma. That sounds quite serious. There's a lot of math, which I was quite good at. So I went into architecture. I chose l'École des Beaux-Arts, which was a very bohemian school. It's not like studying anywhere else in the world. You do live drawings. You get naked every Friday around beers. It's
like,
quite
just like drink about, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite unusual, and it tells you and shows you how to develop your creative sides, but it doesn't really tell you how being an architect might look like. So I was quite keen to find a way to learn that part of things. So I decided to try in London as a place to get my first work experience. And a friend of mine told me, show up at Norman Foster. During the summer, there's a huge amount of competition. They hire a lot of interns. So I was actually panicking a little bit. I didn't have anything to put into a portfolio apart from live drawings of naked lady, which is what you do for the first 3 years of architecture at the Beaux-Arts. So I photocopied things and traced other things. Anyway, came up with a book. I had never had a job before, so I didn't have any proper clothes either, so my sister lent me some clothes. Anyway, I landed in London, and I was lucky enough to get the job, so I started as an intern. I did a couple of months, and at the end of that, they asked me whether I would stay as a permanent employee, which was quite unusual, obviously because I had to go back to school and that was my 4th year. I had to do another 3 years. It's a 7-year sort of study program. It's very long. And what happened at that stage, I think, is that the tutor at my school just realized the opportunity this was, obviously working for such a big practice, and the fact that you know, coming out of a school of architecture after 7 years, the guarantee to get a job is very small. It's about 20%. So we had a conversation, and basically they've agreed, sort of before they told me, that I will finish my studies by working full-time at Norman Foster and go back to Paris to pass my exams. So for 2.5 years, actually, including my diploma year, I ended up getting on a Eurostar, catching up with my friends who had piled up all the things I had to learn, and then I'd pass the exams and come back. So when I graduated, I had 3 years experience, and that was a really big bonus. You know, this is what really kicked out my career quite fast, I guess. And I was lucky enough to then stay with the firm for another 7 years. It wasn't at all what I expected it to be, but
fewer naked sessions and
it was a little bit more rigid,
kind of
yes.
maths.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how I got into that.
That's really cool. You mentioned that you kind of just pulled everything together last minute. You weren't sure. You borrowed your sister's clothes, but then you rocked up and you got the job. What was it like in retrospect, perhaps? Like, what do you think that it was about you turning up that day that got you the job?
I've never told this before to anyone, but I found out years later that Norman Foster is a big open floor office between Albert Bridge and Battersea Bridge. It's a big glass box, and everyone is on one floor. And there are meeting rooms along the window side. And basically the way it works is one of the partners gets the intern to come in, and they're always facing away from the rest of the office. And they have a system, and that's how I got the job.
Wow.
I found out years later, 5 years
Is that
later.
legal? Of course. Any recruitment specialists?
They have learned, you know, they have to find ways to amuse themselves. It's a tough.
I mean, it worked in your favour, so
exactly.
That's
So there was nothing to do with the clothes, or certainly of the portfolio that had nothing in it.
I would love
But you
to
know,
see that.
the lesson for me was obviously that I was lucky enough to get the job, whatever way you get the job. I mean, I'm not saying you can do anything, but and then it's your ability to keep the job that makes a difference. So.
Yeah. And they obviously loved you because you were there for.
Yeah, and then I worked hard, you know, and I think it was a really, really tough part of my life because I really didn't know. I was in a position where everyone had their diploma and worked for a couple of years, and I knew so little. You know, it was very challenging, but then it's this sort of you survive or you die sort of process, and it is exactly like this. And it's a really tough environment where if you don't apply yourself and you don't succeed, they'll get rid of you anyway. So you really have, and I had no social life, I was working every weekend, you know, that's sort of the part of your life where you do that.
And living and working presumably in London?
Yeah, so I had found a place to live. I had convinced some guy to rent me his flat behind the office.
Oh, perfect.
So it was good.
Lack of commute, that's good. You should, yeah. I've just moved around the corner from here, so definitely I was like, oh, where should we hold to the fat? Oh, I hear this place is good. Keep it as minimum as possible. So you studied architecture, it's a long-term commitment, and then you were with the company for 7 years. What's the next part of the story? How did you then discover startup and your passion for business?
So I didn't plan, I think I was getting a bit tired of architecture, and then I was lucky enough to get introduced to Brent Hoberman, who at the time had left lastminute.com and had left for maybe a couple of years and was, you know, building his next venture. And I had a quick lunch with him, and he was saying how he's building this thing, which I didn't understand what he was talking about. The internet meant nothing to me. I mean, we were sending emails, you know, at the time, I think, and that's pretty much, and we didn't think email would be a proof, legal proof or anything. I mean, it was really early stages. So he was telling me about this new platform he wanted to build, and I kept telling him I didn't think I was right for the job, I had no experience, but he was quite keen, which was sort of interesting for me to see that he could see something that I obviously couldn't understand. And so towards the end of the conversation, I thought, I'm going to tell him I'm pregnant because that's definitely going to put him off. I was, by the way, pregnant.
You didn't just make that up.
But I hadn't told anyone yet because it was early, but I thought it's not fair to, you know, get into a business, and a very young business, when you're going to, you know, have to get off for 9 months or whatever. So I told him, and then he said, he didn't really take a lot of time, and he said, well, you should still come on board. And I think at that point, you know, when we talk about making decisions and intuition and gut feeling, sometimes it can be someone else's intuition. It doesn't have to be yours. You know, if someone sees something in you so strongly that even though you're going to potentially disappear and never come back, and still they want to give you that chance, you sort of need to transfer your trust into them, if you can, and get their intuition to become your decision making. So I think it's along my career, and I realized this way later, that this was what happened, is I thought if he believes I can do the job, then maybe I can. And he gave me 24 hours to leave my wonderful career in architecture, which I've taken quite a lot of investment trying to build. And so I just made the jump, and I thought, why not? And you know, it was a beginning of a completely different story, obviously. I did this project for 3 years, which is called MyDeco, which is a platform for aggregating everything to do with the home sector. And after 3 years, I think mainly because he was an aggregator, creatively for me, there was just not enough meat to go after. I was a bit frustrated. And so we started talking about other things to do. And then the MADE business model came about. And we started developing that. And then got together with my 2 co-founders and launched a business maybe 6 months after we started sort of planning it.
Wow, so within the space of about 4 years, you'd gone from architecture to founder.
Yeah.
And at the time, how did that feel at the time? Did it feel like a big deal, or just feel like what you were doing?
No, I think anyone can be a founder. I mean, today you can build a website for nothing and you can be a founder. I think it's not so much the founder's part. The part which was different is the running the business part, you know. That, for us, we were, I mean, they were young, they were 10 years younger than me. So, you know, I was sort of quite old.
Your co-founders?
Yes. So, but we're still quite young and certainly very inexperienced in running businesses. And the challenges that would come with building MADE as a business in the landscape, which was the furniture sector at the time, where there had been very little innovation in the sector, where hadn't really transited online, or you had website, but there was no upside for a retail or a home retail company to be online. They hadn't built any sort of consumer proposition that was, any better than what you would have by just reading a catalog. So there was definitely an opportunity there, but in a sector that's super complex, that most people wouldn't touch, because it's hard to design, it's hard to manufacture, it's hard to deliver, it's hard to return. It's a high price ticket item, which is also an emotional buy, which is functional. Unless you find a customer at a good time, he's never going to buy. It's one of probably the hardest type of product to sell.
Yeah. Early days Made, you guys are saying, coming up against this wall of experts, and you're listening to the media, and it's all going really well. What was it like in those, first 2 or 3 years? And was it super exciting, or was it really daunting? And were there moments where you thought, why on earth are we doing this?
I mean, to be honest, I think it's a little bit like giving birth. You just can't remember. It's probably a good thing. Because I just can't really remember, but I know it was painful.
Okay.
It was very painful. I just think that the luck we had was that the project took off. Mm-hmm. So the struggle to make it happen was relatively short. Then we went into scalability, which is another type of struggle.
Because at the beginning, you were doing everything yourself. There was no budget.
So in my area, I was doing a lot myself, because we had no budget. So obviously the products would come in, and I will use a room in my house or a small studio. And then I thought, we're selling those products online. No one knows how big they are. So why don't we put a model on them? And that's quite a cool idea, because our target audience probably is quite accustomed to relating to fashion. So maybe I get them through that sort of route, which did work. But I had no money for models, so I had to do a bit of that myself, which is quite embarrassing, because I would never obviously cast myself. So eventually we did get budget, so I got a model, but I had no money for clothing, so she was still wearing my clothes for quite a while, probably a year and a half. And eventually I built a very efficient, cost-effective way to produce all of the marketing content. I never used an agency in 5 years. Every single campaign was done on a 4K a day budget, everything, all the big posters, anything, we did everything in-house. So that was a fun part of my job.
And that was a big learning curve as well.
That's the only fun part of my job.
For you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, yes, it was fun, to learn something completely new, and where I have full creative freedom, because my other co-founder have not a single creative in their body. So, I was like, well, why don't you just come up with a new campaign? And we did 15 campaigns a year. It's a lot.
And I'll admit that the first time I was aware of Made.com was commuting on the tube every day.
Yeah.
What's that phone call like the first time? Hi, TfL, advertising agency, but people.
That was a really interesting move for us, because we were very ROI efficient, really ROI efficient. So on the marketing, every pound we spent, we had to see it coming back some way. And obviously everything, that's sort of what we call outdoor advertising. It's very hard to know where, you're going to get a return. So we thought, if we built an outdoor advertising campaign structure that worked like the online one, i.e. you can track it, then we'll know which station, which location, what format would work. So we started to put individual voucher codes on every single piece of advertising around all the network. So we knew exactly that station between 7 and 10 is the one that gets us the click, And then for retargeting, which was the big time, at the time, retargeting was just flourishing. Then everyone got really sick of it. But at the time, people were like, my God, how do they know I like them? People would call me up and say, it's amazing, you crawl up on everything I look at. Like, I don't know if you remember that time, but it was quite amazing. You had all these amazing retargeting tools. And then obviously now it's almost not allowed anymore to do it. So we built a system which meant that we could apply the rules that we knew to any aspect. And obviously we bought unsold inventory at the last minute, and then I would be thrown in the studio building a campaign in a day for the next day delivery. So we could have, a tenth of the pricing that any brand would have, because it was just all the stuff they hadn't sold that month. So that's how we got into the tube. It was super, super successful.
Yeah, that's exactly how I knew about you. So I kind of always wanted to know what that conversation was like. Like, how much? I'll call back in 5 minutes.
No, we did it through agencies. The way it works, obviously, is the agency buy. It's like, it's a piece of real estate.
Yeah.
And then they resell it to you. And then at the last minute, they basically don't even break even. They need to get rid of the inventory, otherwise they can't buy as much quantity in the next one. So they have to get rid. It's like a stock market in a small way.
Okay, I've learned something new. So you're at Made and it's starting to all take off and it's growing, and you've got these amazing co-founders. When I asked you this earlier and you said it's a boring answer, I didn't think it was. At which point do you start to think we're no longer a startup, we're actually an established business? And when you start thinking in that way, does your mentality change in the way, like your business culture? Is that something that?
I mean, the main thing that changes is it's not as hard to make things happen anymore because people want to work with you. You know, you spend the first 2 years of your life having people telling no, and then suddenly they call you and say, we'd like to do something with you. So that's the positive side of growing up. I think startup, non-startup, you know, I think most startups want to keep the startup mentality. That's what they tell you. They want to keep it. What does that actually mean? I don't really know. You know, sometimes I think startup mentality is shit, you know, because you can't pay people at the market price. You have to work very hard with no, you know, we didn't have any sort of benefits for the people working with us. It's not great. I mean, it's an interesting experience, but you certainly can't do it the whole of your life. So moving on and having, you know, be able to establish a good working structure was for me really important. The one thing that changed, I think, is the way you structured your team. You know, what I was telling you earlier is one thing I remember is at the beginning, a lot of people told us it wasn't a good idea. So when it was a matter of hiring people, all the people from the industry are not that interested in coming and work with you because they're like, well, that's not going to work out. So you end up working with hybrid people who have a little bit of experience doing something, but they haven't done it for 10 years. They're certainly not expert in their field. And they're the people who are going to help you shape the business. They're the one who can think the way you think. And often, you know, I feel that there's a very thin line between a crazy idea and a brilliant one is sort of the number of people you convince to come along with it. And if you can get all those people, because they have that flexible way of thinking, to come along that journey, they're the good people to start a business. Once the business is established, this is the time to hire the expert. You have the money, you have the kudos. They have 15 years experience in their field. They're coming in and do the job for you. There's no doubt. Whether you want to get those people early stages, I would say absolutely not. So that's the shift. You know, you end up with a head of department who has done logistics for 25 years. He lives in the warehouse. He's going to know exactly what needs to be done, and he's going to do a better job than you do. So that again is the, you know, a part of growing up is rethinking about how you structure your team.
And during all of this, obviously, you're as an individual, you're learning so much, and you're changing and growing. And let's talk about sort of the end of that journey with Made.com now.
So 5 years on, I think I was quite exhausted. And I just thought it would be a good time to move. We were also raising a big round, and I thought, you know, that could be a nice way for me to just take some time off. The plan was to actually build a new business. And I mean, we can talk about the transition more, but basically I had an idea for a business, and I thought this is the time to do it. You know, it's going to be difficult if I don't do it now. So I decided to leave, and then I go on holiday, and then I go for 2 weeks holiday, which turned into a 5 weeks holiday on an island. And I think for the first time in my life, I had what people call headspace, which I never knew what that was. Mm-hmm. And what it is, for the people who are at the stage I was 5 years ago, it's like having a room in your forehead where this part is a window with a view. You can actually see through it. When before, this part was literally like cluttered. I could never see anything. It's constant cluttered. You know, it's impossible to make a decision without the stress level, everything. You know, you could never see what you were doing. So I'm on this island, and suddenly I have this sort of view, and I can't think of something. There's nothing in my head, you know, which is quite something. So I'm thinking, wow, this is what people are talking about. This is what they get through meditation. I don't know, you know, all these things that people do to clear their head.
But was that quite scary for someone that's so used to being?
Well, it was literally the physical realization was a shock. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you.
And had some sort of exotic cocktail.
No, there was nothing. There was nothing. It was just the time away with nothing to do, nothing to worry about. And then I thought, actually, this is the valuable part of a transition. And going back into a project now, I don't think I'll be my best doing that. So I thought it's probably a good thing to get more of that headspace, which is quite enjoyable, and think again. So this is when I decided to restructure my life around a few axes which I wanted to develop. And one of them I didn't plan, which was to work as a consultant. Soho House called me up and they were building Soho Home, which is their new e-commerce platform where they basically going to sell you all the Soho House lifestyle online, so you can buy the martini glass that you like and everything, the bed linen that you sleep in a hotel and everything basically that they've accumulated over the years. And they thought, I'd be a good person to help them do that. So I didn't plan to do this, but for the first time in my life, I'm paid for something I know. And that's quite nice too. So that's, I decided to go and do that. So I'm doing this now 3 days a week. The two things I wanted to do was to get involved with learning about investment. I have a big thing about learning, and I didn't know what exactly to do, but I thought going forward, one of the things I think I was lacking of is understanding of structuring financing, fundraising, all of this aspect of a startup, a company, which I didn't know enough. So I was starting to look for an opportunity, and I was lucky enough to meet a fund called Felix Capital, which I'm sure more and more of you will know because they're sort of the venture fund for the creative class. They focus certainly on the creative industry. And they've invested in things like Farfetch and Business of Fashion and lots of other brands. They're a very, very good fund, probably the best European fund in terms of their reach. Anyway, and so I came on board as an advisor, which means that the job is about me shadowing the guy who has the business because I want to learn what he does. So I told him, the pitch I gave him is, I sit along in meetings with you and I don't say anything. And in exchange, I advise you on the area I know, so brands and product stuff, for the portfolio companies and new companies that he's thinking of investing in.
Okay, so you've got a whole load of hats now. You're architect, founder, consultant, advisor, and also kind of this weird kind of intern role where you get to sit and listen and learn even more. Is this something that is kind of across your lifestyle? Are you always inquisitive about many things and kind of delving in and learning as much as you can? Yeah,
I don't know yet if this is a good or bad thing, but there's clearly a pattern that I have a huge hunger for learning new stuff, and I'm never as comfortable as when I don't know. I feel I'm actually more creative and I add more value when I come at it from an angle which is not the angle that's expected from someone that has the expertise. Again, this I will find out, but it's certainly something I enjoy a lot. I think that's quite rare. As someone who's sort of part-time perfectionist and control freak, I find that you said this to me earlier, that you're happiest and most excited in circumstances where you don't know you don't feel entirely in control. You're making me weep inside. But I think that's something that's quite possibly rare and extremely valuable if you feel comfortable in the unknown and kind of. Not Is this a therapy session as well as a? I really don't know the answer to this.
I'm not qualified. Don't take any of this away.
I think maybe in 5 years I'll get a view on what it is. It's simple though. It's what we all like is getting a challenge and and trying to find a response. And I think what the truth is though that working at Soho House, I've realized that I actually do know stuff. But you never think you do, because when you build a business and change all the time, and you never reflect on the good stuff, so you're constantly challenging yourself for what you don't know and the next problem, and so I enjoy being able to bring that bit of expertise while also doing this other project with them, which is a data-driven project, which I've never done before, but I pitched it to them as if I knew what I was doing so I could get the job. And now I'm learning as I'm doing it, and it's fascinating, and I've never done data stuff before, really.
Yeah. To give you a bit of perspective, when I first went to meet Chloe, she told me about this. She said, I don't know what I'm doing, but I've asked if I can do it, and they've said yes because they believe that I know what I'm doing, and I love it. And that was that moment where I was like, this is going to be a brilliant interview, because someone that kind of has that approach to life. That's super exciting. That kind of, and I don't think you're consciously kind of saying where is there a gap in my knowledge and how can I learn that. I think you're just finding things along the way that interest you, and then kind of going, well, I won't find the conventional route of finding somebody or doing a course. You're actually just going, no, I'm just going to do it, and I'll get somebody to believe that I can. So, and then off we'll go. And I think that's really quite a nice lesson for everybody. If you want something, just pretend that you can do it. People will trust you. And then if you mess it up...
I'm not liable for this.
But I think it's quite a sort of startup mentality as well, that you can, I actually read a blog post because somebody asked me something for some advice in an email today, and I didn't have time to give them a long-winded explanation, so I just popped them onto a really old blog post of mine, and I sort of skim-read it to check that it was definitely relevant. And one of the things that it says is I met my second startup friend called Dave, because the first guy and the second guy were both called Dave. But second startup Dave told me the biggest secret of it all, which is most people are just making it up as they go along. And I think the number of people I meet in startup, it's true. You're making it up. You think you know nothing, and then one day you're like, oh, I know lots, and I've really learned something, and now I'm an expert. And it feels nice to be in a position where you can be paid to do that. And
absolutely, you can ask for a bit of money too, which is.
I think that's the dream. Yeah. And so you're doing that 3 days a week, and you're involved with Felix Capital.
That's like 3 days a month.
Okay. And are you other things?
And then I chair the board of a new startup, so that's quite new. I'm quite excited about that. So we're building a company called DSC, which is the digital shopping channel, which is the sort of first platform for influencers to gather and sell products. So as you know now, there's a huge industry around YouTubers and influencers to be used as a platform for selling brands. They get paid for it, but if you don't know who they are, you never get the product because you just have no idea how to find it. So the idea for us is just to build, this platform which we will produce all the content. So it'll be a little bit like a QVC for millennials, where the products are actually cool, and it's targeting a much younger audience. So it's launching in the States and the UK in May.
Very exciting. And in terms of, so obviously that's how you're spending your time, and you've talked about having headspace. Are you still giving yourself enough time to have headspace?
It's got smaller.
Yeah. Is that a good thing? Is it good that it can kind of open and close a little bit?
At least I know I can get it, I think part of it is the understanding that you could rebuild that capacity, I guess. I do think that, one of the biggest advice I would give to people is just have a break. I know it's hard and you can't always afford it, but I think it's the level of professionalism I have now is better than ever before. And it's not because I've learned all that stuff. It's because I took time to rebuild myself, and I'm more objective. I can feel it, So I'm busy, but it's, I'm quite happy busy anyway.
Yeah.
There's only so much time I can spend on the beach.
So that's interesting that you said that's the advice that you'd give people. Is there advice that you'd, in retrospect, give to you? Like if you could go back in time and say, Chloe, take a bit more break at this point, or, say yes when you said no?
Yeah,
or...
I'm not very good at looking back.
You're a looking forward person.
I can't. It's very difficult. So no, because by default, why would you change anything? There's no point. You can't either. So yeah. So that's that. But no, I think of talking to younger companies now and people in my position. And I was talking to a girl today about her business, and she was talking to the press about her product. And a lot of the things I've learned is understanding what people want from you, whether it's a customer or journalist or whatever is in front of you, and try and really completely articulate what that demand looks like and build your proposition based on that conversation. That's been probably the reason that Made was a success, and I think a lot of business can benefit from that, is people need to get out of their sort of space and where they stand and think about that communication. Again, it goes back to finding your distribution. But this is definitely the biggest learning, which I now use myself in my own executions.
Brilliant. So I guess the last real thing is to ask what's the future for you and for your
not
project?
That good looking forward either.
Oh, you're in the moment plus.
No, I mean in the moment plus a few months. I've just started this new setup, so I'm going to go with it for a while.
Yeah.
I have no idea. You know, what I like is not knowing. That's my thing. I love it. So the less I know, the happier I am. If something doesn't work out, then I'll have to address it. Yeah.
I'm going to test you now, because what I asked Chloe earlier was if I could ask her anything that she's never been asked before, what would it be? And she said, oh, and sort of squealed very excitedly. And I wonder if, are you happy to share?
Yeah, of course. Wait, she asked me, you know, something about something that's not been asked. And I thought, actually, what I want to tell you is today I was talking to this girl about her new business. And she gave me her first pilot prototype, which I'm really excited about. No, well, you might read into this now, but. And this company called Mystery Vibe is building the first intelligent dildo. This is what it is. It's fully motorized. Actually, Gabby sitting at the front row here is an investor. And he's introduced me to them. Anyway, it was just fascinating talking to, you know, a girl. She's a chief pleasure officer of that brand. About the product, because I followed the story a little bit. And it's just, you know, such a difficult sector to go into and have a narrative and build a story around those products. And for people to take you seriously, but at the same time, obviously, this is an entertainment product for the one who are familiar with those things. So, you know, the point is that they're using some of their latest technology, and you can build an experience with this product, which has 5 motors in it on an app, which will then adapt to whatever you want it to do, and which will be personalized, which has never been done before, you know, on that level. And so I thought that would be the bit I wanted to show you.
And you also made a comment about how cool it was to actually be able to be in your office and to get the product out and be talking with your friends, and that was a big change.
It's a bit.
It's a creative space.
Yeah, I did take it out and show it to the girl sitting next to me, and then I couldn't switch it off, by the way. I had to call Stephanie and say, how do you switch the bloody thing off?
As it sort of runs away with you down the table.
But I thought, you know, it's amazing to live in, you know, in a time where, you know, taking out a dildo in an office during the day,
and now in front of
it's okay, you know? And I think we need to sort of start evolving a lot, especially this is an industry I'm really interested in on a serious sort of level. You know, how this whole advertising industry is benefiting from obviously all the technological advancement, whether it's VR or those sort of personable technologies.
Wearable tech.
And where is that, you know, very wearable. Not out. And how is that going to change how we, you know, relate to ourselves and relate to others, and the side effect of those immersive experiences, you know. So I just think it's cool that finally, you know, we might make this, you know, a more mass accepting subject.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we haven't, kind of intentionally haven't touched a lot this evening on kind of women in business and women in tech, because...
Didn't know where that was going.
Sorry. Choice of words. Because when Chloe and I first met, we kind of said, do we have a whole section on women in tech and in business? And I was quite relieved when Chloe kind of went, yeah, if we have to. Because often successful female founders get asked to be on panels because they're female, or they get to ask about this topic a lot. She's kicking Gabby. I will find out about that later. So we haven't touched on that a lot. We're going to open up to Q&A in a minute, and do feel totally welcome to ask those questions. But I just thought that was quite a lovely moment earlier where you said, I've got this new toy, it's exciting, because I'm in a similar position that you were at Made. I am an all-boys team.
With beard.
Until Monday, I am the beardless beard. And, you know, they can get super excited about some kind of tech things. I'm not particularly tech. I'm the one that kind of came in and get stuff done. Not that they weren't. God, daggers from here at the back. Where am I going with this? It's just quite nice to be able to have kind of serious business talk. Chloe was actually talking about how she's an advisor to this company, how she's talking about brand. Then she's like, oh, actually, I've got one of their products. And then we can, you know, have a bit of a giggle. But it's all of those worlds coming together. It's brand, it's business, it's tech. And it is a real product, and it's something that we can now talk about more so than maybe 10, 20 years ago, more so probably than in architecture, or maybe when in your original studying where you were doing sort of lots of Naked Fridays, that would have been appropriate to come full circle. I don't know, I feel like I'm losing this. So, so we're going to go over to Q&A, but I just want to give the biggest round of applause to Chloe for just being awesome.
My name is Amber.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask you, I'm not sure if you touched on it earlier on, is that did you have a mentor from the beginning or even before you started, or when you had this idea? And if you do have, like, for anybody who has a mentor in mind, how do you go about convincing them to mentor you?
Ooh, yes. Well, I mean, I thought, you know, like Brent was sort of the mentor. Hopefully he feels the same about that, I don't know. But the way it worked is, you know, we started working together, and the mentoring was like this. I came from a design industry. He came from the tech industry. He was building a product in a space he didn't understand, but he had all the mechanical knowledge. So if you need to find a way to give something back to the mentor, whatever it is, you know, they need to, it's a commerce sort of basics. If it's the mentor always have to, you know, make time for you and they're not getting any input that is benefiting them, it's a harder relationship. So it's similar with this financial thing I'm doing, you know, I'm giving him my time for his time. It's easier now, you would say, but at the time it was the same thing, you know, I worked with someone who I was complementary to. So what I knew was nothing to do with the tech sector, however, it was, you know, adding value to what he was trying to achieve. I think it's tough. I try now to do a little bit of, you know, helping people. It's a very difficult thing because unless you really put the time in, a mentor is not going to do much. Unless he's there to introduce you to investors, or, you know, they're very good at helping bringing the experts when you need them. That's a huge help. But in terms of guiding you as an individual and professional, I think it's really challenging to find those people. I mean, I don't know if you have an experience, you know, that backs that up, but I find it, you know, particularly tricky.
It's also quite a personal thing. Like if you're going to sit and talk with someone and tell them, you know, the things that you're concerned about, or tell them the things you're maybe cautious about exploring, but you're excited about, you need to have a good rapport with that person. And they can be the biggest expert in the world, but if you sit in a room and you don't have kind of natural rapport with them, then you're going to struggle to both leave the meeting feeling like it's been a two-way thing.
No, I think you choose mentors usually who you have a good connection with. But I think it's a very difficult area because you need them, you need guidance, and at the same time, they've done it all before, so you can't relate to them that much. So they give you advice which are shortcuts to the way they did it a while back, and sometimes for you, you need the small steps. You need the little steps that took them to, you know, the one thing they're telling you. I actually find that there's a huge amount of stuff you can do sort of on your own by just doing research and listening to, you know, some of the people that you can relate to. Yeah, it's quite tricky. I can't say, you know, apart from, you know, Brent, who I met very early on, there's not really been another person that I could sort of name on that level.
And is it perhaps one of those, I know you don't like to look back, but it's kind of one of those things where you only realise someone's become a mentor after you've been exchanging ideas and information with them for a while?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It takes a while to realise, but now I can tell you I haven't, you know, had another mentor.
Yeah, just a quick question just on how you actually got some great suppliers and designers onto Made in the first place. I mean, the business is fantastic, but without good quality, it obviously dies. What was the best single action you felt you took to bring on good quality suppliers?
So on the designer side, they were unknown. I was quite, I had worked with really big name designers in the past, and I was strongly about the fact that they're not the one who need the route to market. They're the designers who either graduated or struggling to survive as designer, therefore have to do another job because they can't be designers. So those are the ones I targeted. So they were not too difficult to get on board because it's not like they had a lot of other options. Suppliers, that was very hard. Mainly because we had no track record, and we were telling them we will order as we find out whether the product's going to sell. They're used to getting 2 orders twice a year, massive quantities. Everything is stocked in a warehouse for the rest of the year, so they get all their cash at the same time. You know, that's the model that was the industry at the time. So it took a lot of convincing, and the first supplier who agreed to work with me was this British upholstery manufacturer who got the business. He sort of got it. I don't know how. You know, they're pretty old-fashioned group of people in the upholstery industry. And he became like my favorite supplier, our biggest partner. We were 70% of his turnover by year 2. We completely built his business alongside him building ours. And these are the partners that you need. They need to understand what you're trying to do. And they need to want to have a bit of a flair for trying new things. You know, so we did it that way.
So you proactively went out to find them?
We had to go. And remember, we're not using traders and agents, so there was no introduction. It was me going to China every 6 weeks for 10 days, 3 years. I want to cry when I say that. Trying to, convince people to work with us.
The experience that you have at Fig Capital, what would you say a venture capitalist is looking for from a startup to make a decision as to whether to invest or not?
That is a very good question, that is. It's the sort of million-dollar question, which I wish I had all the answers for. I'd be very rich by now. What I just realized is that more and more VCs and, you know, general investment money, it doesn't have to be VC, it can be at a lot of level, is to do with scalability. And it sounds obvious, but this is again to do with distribution. You know, how are you going to grow? You know, what's the potential? You know, we're in a world where now the biggest content company doesn't produce any content. Facebook, you know, the biggest taxi company doesn't own any taxis. The biggest real estate company doesn't have any real estate. Airbnb, you know, it's all marketplace-led. And why is the case? Because of scalability. They create a platform, which means everyone can get onto it. It costs them nothing to grow because all they do is take further commission. And so those are the unicorns that people are looking for. Is the one where you provide with a platform, an infrastructure which is sufficiently agile. That means that sector is going to be going after it, and you're going to aggregate it, and your model is a bit of tech development and commission-based. That's all you do. You don't deliver, you don't take orders, you know, that's all you do. And I think that's what they're looking for, but there's very, very few left, you know, with an opportunity now, very few sectors left with that sort of opportunity.
Thank you so much to so many people. Yeah, big round. Thank you so much to Albert House and their amazing team for this incredible venue. I hope you've all been comfortable. Obviously, thank you to Braintree for sponsoring, and have a good evening. Thank you, everybody.